There's growth in female podcast listening. The latest from Podnews.net. Nielsen report that there's been a significant growth in female podcast listening since the start of the pandemic. Host-read ads drive a brand recall rate of 71%, the research company also says. Meanwhile, Acast surveyed 1,000 podcast listeners in the US and the UK to discover that podcasts are providing a safe space for all women and the brands who support them, they say. The average cost per thousand in AdvertiseCast's marketplace for March was $23.44, the company says, slightly up from February and almost identical year on year. Headliner has launched a product called Eddy. It allows you to upload your audio, it transcribes it, and then you edit the audio the same way as you would a Word document. Deleting a word or a sentence deletes the underlying audio. It's free in beta. Alban Brooke retells a story he'd heard at Podcast Movement last week about automated advertising for podcasts. Attributed to NPR, who deny that they've ever done it, the system would turn on Facebook marketing when shows dip out of the Apple Podcast charts and turn it off again when shows re-enter. It sounds like a clever idea, whoever's doing it. The Sports Podcast Awards took place with the Sports Podcast of the Year going to CBS Sports Morning Combat. Evo Terra has published his Podcast Hall of Fame acceptance speech. Submissions open for the Rooster Teeth Digital Creators Program today from 8 Pacific Time. The Marketing Podcasts Network launched this week. The network has 25 different shows. Listen is a brand new podcast playlist app. It's spelled LISN, and it leverages AI and user-generated podcast clips to create playlists of podcast clips on topics you care about. The Stitcher app now has dark mode, and Podnews' ranker of companies and people we cover suggests in March that our gender split was 36%. Unsurprisingly, Podcast Movement was the highest company climber, and Kai Chuck the highest new entry in people. And in People News, Steve Pratt is to leave Pacific Content and Rogers on April the 30th. He was a co-founder of Pacific Content, which was acquired 3 years ago by Rogers. He'll be taking some time to search for my next big adventure, he says. Meanwhile, co-founder Chris Boyce has left Pacific Content already. He'll be working for a family business called Mail Order Mystery for a while. And Lowell Brillante is to become executive producer at WebMD, building their podcast slate. He moves from iHeartMedia. And in podcast news, Small Town Dicks launches season 10 today, hosted by real-life twin detectives Dan and Dave, who remain anonymous, and actress Yardley Smith, best known as the voice of Lisa Simpson. The series investigates the big-time crime happening in small towns across the US and beyond. It's from Acast, and we thank them for their support this month. Podland this week has an interview with Chris Messina, inventor of the hashtag and host of the Tech Meme Ride Home Experience. Sam and James also discuss the latest YouTube news as well. And Beat the Press, a popular media analysis programme, has returned as a podcast after 25 years on TV. Hosted by Emily Rooney, it focuses on the media and how it reports the biggest stories of the day. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories in full and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.